Hello, everyone. We are very excited to start off this Thursday with Boris Jordan from Curaleaf. Very excited to talk a little bit more about the TSX listing today, which is super exciting. If you guys have any quick questions or comments, feel free to always put them in the chat. Although we're going to be keeping this a close 20 minutes. We should have done this at 4, so it could have been 4:20, but that's all good. We're going to just kind of keep powering along. So Boris, just to start, thanks so much for making the time. Really appreciate it. I know it's a busy day. How has the morning been so far?
It's been great because, it's 10 years of work, and here we are. We are trading on the TSX today. We're very excited at Curaleaf, our 5,000 employees, many of whom are shareholders in the company. I hope all of our shareholders are happy with it too. On the heels of my friend Jason Wild, here's now Curaleaf on the TSX. So we are delighted with the result. Obviously, we'd like to see an up day, but we'll see how it goes and how it closes. But we think it's a good step for the company and for the industry.
Yeah, fantastic. Cool. So could you just kind of give us a quick overview? I know a lot of people who are here are avid cannabis investors or education kind of people as well. But could you give people who are new kind of that insight into why this is such an important step, why the TSX listing is so critical and key?
So I think there's several things that are important. The first thing is that it's a globally recognized exchange. It's the ninth largest exchange in the world. I believe it's the third or fourth in North America. So it's a very significant exchange. With that comes several things. First of all, there's market makers that gives price stability. It advances liquidity because it's an exchange that's recognized globally. So there's a lot more investors on it. It's $4 trillion, I believe, of trading. I heard this morning on the TSX. So this is a very different playing field today. And the other thing I would say is it allows us also to get recognized by indices, right? So we are very hopeful that we can enter the MSCI and the TMX. These are major indices. This will give, again, more institutional exposure to our cap structure. It'll solidify it. It'll become less volatile. And hopefully it brings our cost of capital down. So, and the last thing I'd say on that is that, from what we understand, is it also opens up some tremendous amount of custody operations that weren't open to Curaleaf and to other companies because of the rescindment of the Cole memo by Jeff Sessions during the Trump administration, and the fact that the global prime brokers have rules and regulations internally that allow them to start trading and custodying TSX listed stocks. So these are all positive signs. And, this doesn't say that investors jump in right away. We know there's a lot of hard work in front of us. We have to go on the road. We have to re-educate investors again on Curaleaf, on the sector. But we're delighted we can do it because now the plumbing will hopefully be right.
Yep. Hey, it's again a fantastic step.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Mackenzie. I can jump in on that just a little bit. I'll say that people shouldn't expect anything huge today, because these things take a little while. Now, this is a huge step for Curaleaf, and there's lots of benefits. One little piece of that Boris alluded to is the custody. So for exchange-traded funds, other mutual funds, any cannabis ETFs like ours or others, it's not going to happen instantaneously either. There's not a button on my keyboard that suddenly converts tens of millions of shares of swap into stock. But I'm in touch with Bank of New York Mellon, other big wirehouses and custody banks. Some are automatically going to approve Curaleaf today because that's the way their cannabis policy is written. Some others, like Bank of New York Mellon, they're going to approve it, but it's a little more of a manual process. And I'm in touch with them and talking about that. And you're going to see, big chunks of Curaleaf in lots of different funds converted to stock, which is more tax efficient, by the way.
Yes.
And then, of course, Boris is going to be out on the road talking to lots of firms that some could not purchase Curaleaf previously, and now they'll be able to.
Very exciting. So kind of speak. Okay, go ahead first.
Go ahead, because I just want to remind people that, when, and I do it was quite often, when Curaleaf went public, we had a lot of major investors, invest in the company. Everybody knows the public one, which was BlackRock, because they announced it themselves. And then, of course, 9 months later, after rescindment of the co-member, they had to exit because they couldn't have custody operations. So we're now going to reopen conversations with all of these large, long-only funds that, again, they're going to make their decisions now mostly based on fundamentals. But we can now talk to them. I haven't been on a roadshow with major institutional investors for cannabis in 2 years. So, I'm looking forward to getting back on the road and starting to talk to people about our great sector and the great company that Curaleaf is.
Nice.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Kind of dust off that old travel plan, I guess, as well.
Yeah.
For talking to institutions a little bit more, is there any expectations in terms of what it takes to kind of get them in? Is it really just kind of showing them and providing them education again in terms of what Curaleaf is, what it does, the opportunity there? What's sort of the kind of approach to talking to institutions?
The first thing that's most important is that they don't want to waste their time if they can't buy it. And so they're not even going to allocate resources. So I think, as Dan alluded to, I think over the next, we're going to have a holiday period here right now, but let's assume mid to end of January, we've got the plumbing fixed where, people can now custody and buy and trade in Curaleaf stock. At that point in time, or right around that point in time, we'll start to go on the road and meet with a lot of the investors that basically closed down cannabis investing. And we will start to meet with them and re-educate them on the sector, re-educate them on the company. And hopefully at that point in time, more analysts will start cover Curaleaf as well. And, they'll start making investments based on the fundamentals in the sector. Because the main problem has been a plumbing problem. It's been custody, right? Now, listen, some of them may still have issues with federal illegality, but that will be a fund-specific issue that they may not want to invest because they have Hartley money or something like that. But for the most part, again, I want to say that, most of the big long-onlys were investors in Curaleaf's IPO. So two names that were very public, and I can mention, were BlackRock and Fidelity, right? These are two of the biggest investors, but there's people like Capital and Wellington and Amundi and all these people that we hope we can now talk to, and that have backed other companies that I've taken public in the past, and we can start educating them. But I think it's a process, and I think it's a process that'll take the better part of 6 months to start getting these people into the stock.
That's fair. Is it an easier story to tell than it was, let's say, 2 years ago? I think a lot has changed for the positive. A lot of new states, a lot of, New York, everything like that. Is it easier to tell the story and kind of, show the opportunity?
Investors love good valuations. And if you ask me, these companies are trading at rock bottom prices, right? I mean, again, I want to go back, right? Curaleaf went public at $4.4 billion valuation on $70 million of revenue that year. We will do, 1.4 to 1.5 billion next year. And we are now trading at half the market cap that we were when we went public 5 years ago. And so if you ask me, these are great valuations to look at. Now, obviously valuations have slightly corrected, although not in risk areas, but nowhere near to where we are today. And so I think that investors love good valuations. And I think that the cannabis sector and Curaleaf in particular are trading at great numbers now to buy.
Hey, do you think another thing about the valuation is, investors in our fund, myself and everybody else, we've had a real rough ride the last 3 years, of course, but we're going to be able to convert, total return swap into Curaleaf stock. And that's just a pocket to pocket transaction. You're not going to see any market impact for that. I'm excited about the people that Boris and others are going to be talking to that are on the sidelines right now that haven't been able to invest in Curaleaf and now might be able to. But Boris is going to be able to talk to those investors and say, potentially, no promises, but we're expecting it. We're going to be able to get 280E removed. So if you think, if you like Curaleaf's valuation right now, factor in the impact of 280E, and you can get in before that takes impact. It's a pretty damn good sales pitch to be able to invest in this stock at rock bottom prices, potentially. In my
opinion. If you ever listen to Stan Druckenmiller, his favorite investment style. I was listening to a podcast recently. He said, I like to tip my dough into a story, and then once the story starts to get realized, I start to buy as it's going up. And when euphoria starts, he usually gets out. But this is that opportunity. I hope to be able to tell investors, put a small toe in the water here, get involved. And you have to understand, for these big funds, $50 million is a very small investment in a company, right? I recently took my insurance company public in Europe, and I was talking to all the same investors, and they said, Boris, unless we can put $200 million to work in your IPO, it's not interesting to us. So it's literally that kind of a situation because of the amount of money these people manage. They need so this, even if you open a door for 1, 2, or 3 of these investors, it could be a game changer for a stock like Curaleaf.
Sure.
Yep. Is there also sort of a domino effect? If somebody comes in, it makes it more attractive for others to come in. Does it sort of work that way, or is it sort of independent?
I think it does. I remember the day that BlackRock released that information onto a Bloomberg, right? That they made an investment into Curaleaf. I think our stock was up 30%. I mean, now listen, it shouldn't be that way, but this is the kind of sector where that kind of thing happens, right? Emerging economies and emerging growth sector typically trade very erratically that way.
That's true. Do you think also, just in general, kind of in the wider picture, with rates potentially coming down next year, everything like that, that the overall environment makes it more attractive to sort of finding those growthier, more risky?
No question. Growth stocks are very susceptible to rates. Rates coming down. Yesterday's news, I think, is great news. I think it's a little bit late, but nonetheless, they made the announcements, and I think we've seen markets react. And most interestingly, what we're seeing now is some of the more high-risk growth stocks starting to react, right? It's been largely the large market cap stocks that have been reacting to date. Now we're starting to see, the Russell and all these starting to catch up. I think that's really, really good for the cannabis sector. And again, for Curaleaf. And by the way, when the news on some I lost you for a second. The first reaction is, we'd love to get in, and they can buy Curaleaf because we're on the TSX, right? It's much easier because they can get in quick, right? Whereas with other things, you have to open up special custodians, you have to go to a small brokerage house, the whole thing, that becomes a problem. I have a lot of friends in the investment world. The first thing they'll say, particularly large hedge funds, $10 billion, $5 billion, $15 billion hedge funds, they'll say, Boris, we love this story, but we're not going to go and open a special custody relationship just to invest in one stock. We're just not going to do that. But if they can turn around and have their PM just buy because it's a TSX listed, you can go to Bank of New York or Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs or any of these, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking on the work, I think, to get the listing, to save other people from that work, so they're willing to kind of make moves, which is fantastic. I would love to talk just a little bit, I know we're closing out 2023 in general, kind of moving into 2024. A lot of positive things kind of in the wings for cannabis, including, again, the listing, which is fantastic. If you had to sort of make a list of top 2 or 3 things that you would pick for like goals or things that you'd want to have, either, for Curaleaf itself or just the industry in general, what would you sort of put on?
My mantra for 23 was get efficient, get lean, get your operations in order. And that's what Curaleaf did. And by the way, it affected our numbers. There's no question. But coming out, and I think you'll see it in the fourth quarter already, coming out of the fourth quarter, it's return to growth. And that's my mantra for 24 and 25. And now that we're coming into 24 and 25 on a much leaner footing, we cut about $120 million of costs. We reduced our inventory by $100 million this year. We got out of markets that weren't performing. We're going to be going into 24 with New York now operational. We settled that. We made our first sales. We're starting to see really good demand for our products in the New York adult use market. Germany, what we think will be April 1st, major catalyst for our European business. So Poland, which we just started selling to, we hope that's going to be a $5 to $10 million business for us next year, brand new market for us. So we're seeing growth. So we're returning to growth. Ohio at the end of the year, we hope with the rulemaking will hopefully fire. And we're also seeing, listen, we're all sitting there waiting for a Florida decision and a Pennsylvania decision. These are big decisions. Now, those, in my opinion, are 25 stories. But hey, listen, it's nice to know that 24 and 25 are going to be return to growth years. That's what I'm excited. And it's a return to growth on a much leaner structure as well, which is really, really good for the numbers.
Yep, that's fantastic. A lot to look forward to, I think, in the next coming years, which is awesome. In terms of the day today, just zooming in a little tighter, what's the rest of your day got, for you? I'm sure you're incredibly busy running around, but you did all the fun stuff in the morning with the bell ringing. What's the rest of the day?
So we have a big lunch here starting in a couple of minutes with all the analysts. We have U.S. analysts, Canadian analysts that came up for the bell ringing, and we're going to be meeting with them at lunchtime and talking to them about the story. And then in the afternoon, we're doing a little bit of meetings with funds up here in Canada. And 5 o'clock this afternoon, we got a big cocktail party for all the investors in Canada and bankers. And then at 8 o'clock, on the way back to the States. So that's the schedule for today.
The work never stops. Well, again, we appreciate you doing it very much. Thank you so much for being on. Really, really appreciate it. Congratulations. Again, I cannot say it enough. Dan, thanks for jumping on as well, too. Really, really appreciate it.
Dan and Mackenzie, thank you for giving me some exposure. Appreciate it.
Anytime. All right. Thanks again.
Well done.
We'll catch you later. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at advisorshares.com.